Okay, Chuck here with Queen Bee Creations, coming at you with another craft idea. Now I showed you a picture up front of some pallets, and this is what I've broken them down into. So the first pallet that I had, super old. You can see that a lot of the wood's old, it's splitting. This is gonna be great. So don't agonize over it. The boards don't have to be perfect for this look. We're gonna be doing some signs, and a little bit of age kind of actually helps make it look kind of cool. And I'll show you how. But what I did was remove them, and I gotta tell you, not the easiest thing in the world to break down a pallet. So if you got somebody with a sledgehammer and some muscles, pull them in. I got about halfway through the project of tearing it apart and decided, yeah, I'm a little old for this. And this is kind of a lot of hard work, and I could be doing something else. So yeah, I got somebody else to tear it apart for me. And then I just cut the boards in half. So they're this long, I just cut them down into this long. One, it gave me a little bit more, and because it makes a more reasonable size sign. And once we do this, we're able to create signs of whatever size we want. We can do a single one, we can ultimately put them together and have signs like this, or this wide, or 4. I'm not sure if I'm doing 3 or 4, I'm thinking 4, because I want to use one of the new Jamie Ray stencils, but I gotta get these all prepped first. So one of the things, especially this old one, you can see is pretty dirty, pretty scuzzy. I don't mind some of that from the standpoint of I'm not looking to sand this smooth. I want the roughness. That's why I'm using these older textured boards. But I find, especially because they've got splinters and things that aren't smooth, and I will be sanding it after, that I just take an old bristled brush, and it's pretty stiff, and that helps me be able to get a lot of the dust off of these before I start any of my projects. And it works way better like on these rough edges than doing something with a cloth, because if you do a cloth, any of those splinters will go through it and into your fingers. So if you've got a brush to be able to help clean that out, it's not only easier, it's probably a little safer. So for this step, all we're looking to do is clean off our boards and get them ready for the next step, which is our paint. I have my boards all sanded off, and I kind of have them laid out how I'm going to work my sign. Now what I did do is I said that we were going to be doing some stenciling, and we are. And I'm going to be using the new Rooster Flower Sack. The Rooster Flower stands for Quality Stencil from Jamie Ray. And what I did do was I looked to see the size of the stencil compared to my boards. Did I need 3 or did I need 4? Turns out, obviously, 3 for the width. So check your stencil first to be able to see what's going to work, what's going to fit best. Now, before I attach the boards together, I am going to do my painting and my decoupage on them. So what I have looked at, I'm going to be using one board with some of this napkin, and you can see it's been used for other projects. And I also have some of the monochromatic decoupage paper from Jamie Ray, vintage, and I'm going to use pieces of this, and I think that I might be able to get 2 boards out of this one. So what I'm looking at is painting out the boards first. I don't want to have solid coverage, so I'm going to be painting it fairly loosely. I think I'm going to do 1 white and 2 So using the DIY beadboard and 2 in the Apothecary. And I'm looking at it being fairly dry coverage. So separate these out and give you an idea of what I'm talking about here. I'm going to be decoupaging on top of this, but I want to have a little bit of the paint to be able to echo up through. We're going to be sanding the decoupage paper, so it's going to have a really worn, much softer look to it when we go to stencil over top. And I'm painting the sides, even though I'm going to be gluing both of these sides to the other boards, but just because they're not perfectly straight. So there will be some of the sides that will show through when they're attached, and I just want them to look semi-finished. And again, not solid coverage. So as you can see, there's still wood showing through, and I'm okay with that. Now, for the Apothecary, I'm just going to use the same paintbrush. There we go. Okay, and I'm just going to dip that same brush in, because I don't mind if there's some white on there, and if it softens it out a little bit. And again, we're just going to do the same thing. So getting some of our paint on, and then we want this to have a chance to dry fully before we start doing our decoupage. The next step in our project is we're going to decoupage. Now, you could call it quits at this stage and just glue these together, anchor them together like I will show you soon, and then do your stencil. Already super cute. Just, I really like having the I was going to say tri-colored boards, but it's just 2 colors. 3 boards, 2 colors. But we're going to add some decoupage. Now, I'm going to use DIY crystal clear chandeliers, so the liquid patina, to be able to do this. And I'm not necessarily anticipating doing it everywhere, but I do want to get some of the big floral designs in. This has got some nice little writing. And this is a napkin. And I was just thinking, I did this for another project. I've already separated it. So if you're gonna decoupage with napkins, usually they are 2 or 3 plies. So you wanna separate the plies out so you get down to just the 1, so that it's not lifting, okay? And here, we're probably good just with this. Now, I'm not looking to have this fit perfectly on my board. I am going to have the edges overlapping because we'll sand those edges off afterward. But I am thinking that I would like to have some gaps. So I'm going to cut away some so that it doesn't fit perfectly here, and so that I have some of it coming up and down, and that there's a little bit of space in there where we're just going to have board showing through. And we're going to sand this back as well, so we're going to have gaps. It's designed to do that. Now, I'm just trying to lay out my papers roughly so that when I go to do the glue, we're all set to just glue things down. All right, So now that I've got the layout a little bit, let me just work on a board at a time. And so for this, I am just dipping my brush in. I'm gonna coat my board. So this is with the liquid patina. Just flicked it all over my t-shirt. And then lay my paper down. And then I'm just going to paint over more of the liquid patina. So this is, again, this particular one is the Jamie Ray monochromatic. Monochromatic, that's a little challenging to say. I'm not sure when they were naming it, they thought about the ease or difficulty of it. So we're gluing that one down. I've got my 2 napkins, doing the middle. That's it. We're gonna let it dry and then come back and see how it works with the sanding. Super easy so far. Now that our boards are dry, we are just going to do a little bit of light sanding. And I'm taking a 180 grit sandpaper, just wrapping it around my block. And we're going to lightly go over this. This is going to take a little bit of the shine away, and it's going to soften the colors out. It's going to give us a lot of worn areas, and that's what I'm looking for. We're stenciling over top of this, so this is just our background that we're doing. The other thing that it's going to do is, as I go along those edges, it's going to help cut all of the edges of my decoupage paper. So all of the pieces that I didn't cut to size, we're going to be able to knock all those off and get them off of our piece very easily, right? So saves a lot of work that I didn't have to cut the paper to size to start with. So let me just get these ones off. Excellent. And then we just sand. And I'm gonna want some worn areas. If you have a piece that flies off, perfect. This is just background. So you can see how it already gives, you know, if we look at these 2 boards, look at how much it just kind of fades out that color. You still see the pattern, right? It's not taking that away, but I don't have all of this brightness to contend with when I go to do my stenciling over top. So it creates this beautiful, worn look to it. I still have some of the color of that board coming through, and now I'm getting some of the wood showing through as well. Love it. All right, so that one's perfect. I say that and then I go and do something else. That's perfect. I'm gonna carry on with the other 2 boards, and then we can set it up for the next step. For this part, this is the overnight stage of our project. This is where we want to glue our wood pieces together, and we're going to clamp them, leave them to sit overnight. Now, I typically use, I really like Type Bond 3, Type Bond 2, or Gorilla wood glue. So I'm going to use, hopefully it's open, get some out. Now these boards aren't perfectly smooth, so they don't fit flush. So I'm putting a fair amount of glue on only because I want them to hit wherever they can. And it's gonna leak out the back, which is okay for my project. But I'm going to get them sitting overnight. Tightly clamped. Well, not as tightly as that. Let me get them up over this side too. Just to hold it in place. And I'm just leaving it clamped overnight, and then tomorrow we'll see how well they adhere, and I will add some extra support onto the back. I just like to get them clamped together first and maybe glued so that when I'm futzing around on the back, they're holding together. If need be, you can attach smaller pieces of wood onto the back for bracing, nail down through it. We may be doing that tomorrow. We'll see how well these adhere. These are my really old boards. They're very dry. They are really uneven, so I am thinking I'll probably need to add a little bit of a cross brace on the back just because they're not even enough. But we're gonna let them do their thing overnight and kind of cure up. But I gotta tell you, how awesome do those worn boards look with that sanded back paper? I'm loving it, and you can see it works equally well with the napkins and with the decoupage paper, but it is just gorgeous. So I'll see you tomorrow after these have dried up, and we'll see what we need to do to be able to firm them up in place before we start our stenciling. See you then. Our boards have had overnight to dry, and they are glued together, but it's a tenuous hold. So I did cut a couple of little half-inch pieces of wood, 1/2 inch by 1 inch maybe, and just enough to be able to give a little bit of a bracing at the top and the bottom. And all I'm looking to do, and I've got some screws that go far enough in, I just want to do a bit of a starter spot for each. And I'm just looking at putting one screw through the brace and each of the boards. So if that glue releases, they're still held together, and it's going to keep everything nicely in place. Now, I do have a power drill, but my husband stole my batteries for the weed whacker at home. So I guess technically it's his. It just lives here at my shop. So we're just gonna do this the old-fashioned way, which works just fine. It just takes a little bit more effort. All right, I've got my bracing on the back, and now it's time for us to stencil. And if you recall, I said that I was going to use a brand new stencil from Jamie Ray Vintage, which is their rooster stencil. And there's a couple, this is like a rooster flower, kind of what you'd see on the edge of a flower sack, perhaps. It's just super cute, and just is kind of a nice little topping to this. We'd already measured to make sure that it was going to fit. Now, I don't want to use black because I've already kind of softened all of this out. So I'm going to use Weathered Wood by DIY, which is kind of a rich gray. It's not a mid-tone, a little bit darker than that, but it's not like a charcoal, right? So a bit of a taupey gray, which I think will be great. Now, the only challenge that I have with this stencil is, as I would with any stencil on this, is that the boards aren't perfectly even, right? So we've got a little bit of a dip in there, and that just means I need to be a little bit careful when I get to the joints. But all I'm going to be doing is kind of taking a fairly dry brush, and so you saw me dip into the paint, but then smear it off to the side so that I offloaded a bunch of my paint. I don't want it to be so wet that it's going to seep under the edges of my stencil. So you can do kind of a bit of a smearing, a bit of a pouncing, all just to be able to get the paint within the borders. Now here's where I reach one of my weird edges. So a little bit of smearing is probably the technique to use. Okay, that helped that it was a T, I think. Now, for the letters, super easy because they're nice, big, wide letters. It's going to be a little bit more involved when I get to the rooster because he's a little bit more detailed as well. But they're just doing a little bit of a swipe down in the direction of the feathers and of the detail helps to be able to get it in. Again, you don't want to have a super wet brush or what a lot of people refer to as a very juicy brush. You want to have it a little bit dry so that you're not smearing it underneath the stencil, but it gets down in there and gives you a little bit of those details quite easily. Okay, I'm going to carry on with this, and I'll see you shortly. Okay, time for the big reveal. Let me turn it around to face you. We'll see how it looks. Awesome. So you can see that this was a good color choice. It's not so stark. We are going to let this dry and then lightly sand it. So again, give it a little bit more of a worn look and matching with our base. And so we'll wait for that to dry to be able to do that, which will soften it a little bit, but it shows up great against the background. I love that rooster. I think I'm going to be using him on a lot of things, you know, without some of the words, but I love the rooster. So we're going to let that dry, and then we'll come back and we'll finish it off. We are, now that our paint is dry, we're just going to lightly sand this. And I'm using a sanding block that is virtually smooth. Most of the sand is gone off of it. I'm just looking to get some of the highs of that paint knocked back so that I've got the same smooth texture where the paint is as I do with the rest of the board. So you can see me just kind of feeling along where that is. And I'm just looking for just a nice smooth texture. And that's it. That's awesome. And I'm just gonna wipe it back, get rid of a little bit of the dust, and last step is just to seal. Now, to seal it, we could use a polyacrylic, so we could use DIY Big Top, we could use the liquid patina, the crystal clear chandelier, we could use the oil wax, especially in the white maybe, of the Sweet Pickens line. We can use clear wax, and that's what I'm going to do. I don't want it to have a shiny finish. I still want that kind of rustic look that wax gives it. And the first thing that you'll notice is that it deepens the color, so it brings that color of that gray paint back out. So as much as it is sort of disappeared, but it's adding a little bit of intensity. Now, as this dries, that will lighten up a little bit again, but we'll still have the distinction of it. want to get my edges. So just nice little even coat. I'm just touching up here. A couple of places where I can see that I want the wax to sink down into the paper a little more, which will just kind of keep it cured. And then I'm just going to let this sit. I'm going to let this harden, right? So let the wax cure and just kind of wipe off any excess. I'm going to let the wax cure, and then I'm going to come in tomorrow. So just let it harden overnight. I'm going to come in tomorrow and buff it up, and we have a beautiful little sign. I hope that you give this a try. You can use any wood. It doesn't have to be pallet wood, but any wood that you have, and be able to layer some color and some decoupage paper and words of your choice. Perfect for your home, for your cottage, and for a gift. Hit the thumbs up button, subscribe, keep me coming in your feed. I look forward to seeing you next Friday with a brand new project for you to turn your hand to. Take care.